Just because your movie is about something important doesn't mean that your movie is actually important.
Would you say filmmakers today are more concerned with forcing a message or telling a good story?
I definitely feel like more people now are concerned with forcing a message versus telling a good story. And, you know, say what you will. I mean, I think that can be, it could be a good thing. It could be a bad thing. It's hard to say, but I do feel like a lot of movies, I'd say overall, have probably been hurt from being the best movie that they can be when they're trying to focus mostly on a specific kind of message. Because trying to force a certain kind of message doesn't always make for the most interesting story, especially if you have like a certain agenda that you know that you want to push. And it's a weird time, it's a weird world in that sense, because on the one hand, you can say, well, film is about storytelling. We're just trying to share the human experience with each other and connect to each other in that way, and we do that through stories. But on the other hand, you can say that film is the most powerful medium that there is, and therefore it is extremely influential, and therefore whatever my agenda might be needs to be represented in that art form, and therefore like I want that out into the world. So I understand why people feel like films need to have a certain type of messaging. I'm a little more in the camp that I think that we're just here to tell good stories, but I can understand why people have been indexing so heavily on that. I mean, when you look at the Academy Awards and things, et cetera, or award shows, it feels like they have to reward movies that are important versus just movies that have great storytelling. But a person who is a friend of mine in life had a great way that they talked about this, where they said, just because your movie is about something important doesn't mean that your movie is actually important. And I think that right now there's a lot of movies that are made about important subjects, but the movies themselves aren't actually as important as they seemingly portray themselves to be. So, yeah.
That's interesting. So the topic of the movie is important, but the actual, story within it, the dialogue, the characters, it falls flat?
Yeah, the execution isn't actually, doesn't live up to the importance of the actual topic.
So instead of making sort of filler and junk food type movies, now we're doing it with a purpose in mind, but there's still the same filler that's there. It's not that there's not a story that we can really.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to kind of discuss it, where it's like, a lot of people talk about, oh, well, we should have movies like this to, engage in the conversation. But a lot of the movies don't actually forward the conversation at all. They're sort of a little bit hollow, even if they have like what you would consider an important message or dealing with an important subject matter. Again, that doesn't mean that the messages that they actually have in their film are as important as the matter itself.
Sure. I mean, a lot of deep topics can be covered in documentaries, and a lot of those documentaries people unfortunately sometimes don't want to see, which often I'm attracted to ones that maybe take a little bit of more of a serious turn, but when you see award shows, they do seem to shy away. But if it's wrapped up with glam, I guess we could say, then it might be more acceptable.
Yeah.
Maybe they don't feel as true. Maybe that's the thing. Like, it's not that we don't want to see certain issues, and that certain issues don't definitely exist.
Right.
But the way they're done, I think maybe it feels like it's disingenuous.
Yeah. Well, I mean, because again, being that this is, filmmaking as an art form, I mean, I have such a tremendous amount of respect for, people who have excellent craft. And I think, if you're going to do a movie that has a very important message, craft should be extremely important as well. Because, we're here, we're in a theater, we're going to watch your movie. And I feel like, some of the movies that index heavily on messaging maybe try to make the excuse of like, or not necessarily they're not trying to make excuse. Nobody's trying to make a bad movie, but I think that some people might spend too much time focusing on the message versus having excellent craft and being able to cleverly show that message through the art, as opposed to just having it be on the forefront.
As an audience member today, do you feel that movies are lecturing to you rather than entertaining you?
I feel like a lot of movies can be seen that way. But again, it kind of relates to what we were talking about, where it's movies focusing on storytelling versus focusing on messaging. And I have no problem if a filmmaker or a movie has a certain type of message that they want to convey. But yeah, it does become, it takes me out of it if it becomes too heavy-handed or too much of a lecture, because I'm trying to experience your world or experience, this filmmaker's subjective point of view and get a new perspective and learn through these characters. But if I'm not organically getting that message through the art of the story, and there's a lot of allusions to, say, what's happening in the real world, or there's a lot of like political topics that are kind of being shoehorned on top of this story, well, essentially you're taking me out of it, because I'm not just watching your movie, I'm also thinking about, this thing that's happening in the political sphere while I'm watching your movie. So I think if you're going to have, as you put it, like if you're going to have a message or you're going to lecture, whatever that message is, it better be super, super cleverly intertwined within the point of view of the characters that we're watching. Because otherwise, then I'll just go watch a TED Talk instead. Like, why would I want to experience this through the vehicle of, filmmaking, as opposed to just listening to somebody talk about it?
Right. Are there any movies that you can think of off the top of your head where they do weave in a message, but it's done in a way where it doesn't feel overt?
I mean, like, I feel like a movie like Get Out does an excellent job dealing with racism, but in a purely subtextual kind of way. I mean, it's actually pretty literal. I mean, it's right there in the film, but through the craft of the story that was being told in that film, that's where it was really excellently kind of weaved into the subtext and how racism exists within our current culture. So that's a movie that I think, for instance, does an excellent job having those issues and messaging service the story that we're watching. So that's one that comes to mind.
What do you love about the film Moneyball?
What do I not love about the film Moneyball? I just think it is such a well-crafted, beautifully told movie that just comes together so well. I mean, I think that just the whole idea of like the romanticism around, the game of baseball and how that reflects, just the human experience and our lives and everything, I think was just so poetic. I mean, Aaron Sorkin, of course, an incredible writer, and just so the dialogue is always great. All the scenes are great, just all the execution in there. But again, that's just a movie I feel like, referencing worlds that maybe not everyone enjoys. You don't have to be a baseball fan to watch that movie and still really, really appreciate the art and the romanticized poeticism that comes from it.
Who was your favorite character in Moneyball?
I mean, obviously, I think Brad Pitt's character is great. Billy Beane, Jonah Hill's character is great, but really it's their dynamic together that really, to me, makes the film work so well.
And if we were going to do what I said earlier, a commenter talked about psych evaluations on characters, on those two characters, just a brief log line, psych evaluation on both.
I guess Billy Beane is, he's dealing with just the feeling of being someone who's cursed and a complete failure, who didn't live up to what he was supposed to, which was to be this great star baseball player. He felt like he was someone who was a permanent loser who was cursed. And Jonah Hill probably just sort of represents like the character who just doesn't fit into this world that is extremely archaic and has a very specific way of doing things. He's the misfit amongst this group of baseball elitists and players and organizations. So just those are my analyses of the characters.
But he's a misfit, but does he let that stop him? Is he hindered by it the way the hero is almost hindered by sort of his Achilles heel?
I guess he's not necessarily hindered by it. I mean, I think now that you're making me, write a critical studies paper on it, I think probably Billy Beane just has more of a like internal hindrance with everything, and then Jonah Hill's character is sort of an external hindrance with it, just on how he looks. And he sort of reflects the fact that there's a line in the movie of like, people are mischaracterized and judged by a lot of superficial things, like how they look, how they throw a ball, how they run. And Jonah Hill might sort of represent that in that kind of way, where it's like, how is this guy going to teach me about baseball, this nerd who is obsessed with statistics and looks super goofy. So I don't know, that's his hindrance.